People think stained glass is relaxing, and sure, it can be, but first, it will humble you repeatedly. There's a side of stained glass that no one really talks about when you're first starting out. The learning curve, the weird little surprises, and the frustration that sets in right when you feel like you're starting to get the hang of it. In this video, I'm sharing 10 things that I wish someone would have shared with me when I first started stained glass. These are the moments that challenged me most, and the things that made me fall in love with the craft even more. If you're new or thinking of diving in, this might save you time, money, or maybe even a few burnt fingers. One thing I see a lot with beginners is tool overload. There is so much information out there and so many lists and kits available. It's very easy to feel like you need absolutely everything before you even get started. When I first got started with stained glass, I was a young mom with no disposable income really, and I had to keep things simple and affordable. And in all honesty, this actually, I think, worked in my favor. It helped me focus on learning the core skills with just the basics: a glass cutter, grinder, foil, soldering iron, and a few essentials. I did buy one specialty tool early on, something meant to help place the foil, but I didn't like it and never really used it again. It cost maybe $5 at the time, but even that was frustrating when money was tight. So if you're just starting out, don't feel like you need to get every gadget or specialty item right away. Take some time, figure out what it is you like to do, figure out where your pain points are, and then you can grow your collection over time. I'll be making a beginner tool video soon with a clear and minimal list, so be sure to check the description for that once it's live. I thought cutting glass would be simple. Score a line, snap it cleanly, and move on. But no. I'm self-taught. I live in a rural area and I got started in the mid-2000s. YouTube wasn't what it is now, and there wasn't much information online about making stained glass. I had one book to get me started and no extra income to spend on a class. It was all trial and error and a few tears of frustration, if I'm honest, before I finally hit my stride. If you're still learning, try finding discarded window glass to practice on. It cuts cleanly, it's often free, and saves your good glass for real projects. Just make sure that it's not tempered. One of my earliest memories of doing stained glass is of my husband trying to cut glass for the first time on a sheet of glass that he got from his parents' barn. I was sitting on the floor in the corner of the room arranging flowers for my friend's wedding while he made a score and tried to break it with running pliers. It wasn't breaking. So he turned to me and asked, "How hard do you need to squeeze on the handles?" And I said, "Well, not too hard, but just try squeezing a little bit harder." So he did, and the glass exploded. It went completely across the room from where he was to where I was sitting, and it just rained down everywhere. It was complete and total chaos. As you can imagine, it did take him a while to build up the nerve to try even cutting glass again. Eventually he did. Like so many things, soldering is a skill. It needs to be learned, practiced, and then refined like any other skill. I recently heard a very insightful discussion on a podcast I listened to called Art Juice. It's hosted by two painters, but most of what they talk about can be applied to any creative discipline. They talked about how as artists, we often get hung up on the final results, even when we're supposed to be practicing. If we sketch something in a sketchbook, we still want it to look good. But Olympic athletes don't do that. They go to the gym, they work out. Their training isn't supposed to be a performance. It's just part of the process. No one expects their workout to be perfect. That comparison really stuck with me, because in stained glass or any art form, we tend to treat every single thing we make as a finished product. But practice is still practice. It's okay if it's messy. It's okay if it's not beautiful. What matters is that you're building your skills. And here's the good news. There are ways to practice soldering without breaking the bank. You can cut a few 1-inch strips either in art glass or even window glass and pair them with border-sized strips to make a little practice panel. Solder it, then reheat and remove the solder and do it again. Later on, you can even use those same pieces to practice decorative soldering techniques. And I do cover how to make this basic practice piece along with all the ins and outs of learning how to control your solder flow more in depth in my soldering course, which I'll link below. The concept seems simple. Wrap a piece of copper foil around the edges of the glass and burnish it down. It's not rocket science, right? But when there's no one around to show you how to do it, it quickly becomes awkward. When I started, I was trying to line it up from above, tilting my head and looking underneath to center the foil. It feels ridiculous now, but at the time, that was the best solution I had. Eventually, I realized I could just flip the foil over and place the glass on top of it. And suddenly, I could see exactly what I was doing. My speed and accuracy improved immediately. Later, I picked up a foil dispenser that holds the roll vertically, and that eliminated the twisting and tension issues I was having. Even the gummy issue I had with the scissor blades sticking together, swapping them out for a small utility knife solved that issue too. With these changes, my foiling became a whole lot smoother. Glass isn't just about color or texture, it handles differently too. Some glass cuts like butter, while others are dry or brittle. The sound of your cutter, the pressure you need, how it breaks, it all varies. I once picked a beautiful rippled glass for a project before I understood how differently glass could behave. It looked amazing, but every cut was a struggle. And that's when I learned that sometimes the prettiest glass can be the most temperamental. Now, I always consider how a glass cuts before using it. And if need be, I'll adjust the design or consider it wisely if I know a sheet is going to be difficult to work with for a specific design that I'm working with. Yes, mistakes are frustrating, but that's where the most learning happens. Whether it's miscutting a piece, foiling the wrong side, or knocking a finished panel over, every mistake teaches you something. One thing that I've learned is to slow down, breathe, and not rush decisions, especially when I'm frustrated. And when all else fails, walk away for a bit. Your project will still be there when you come back, and you'll probably handle it better. That could be for 10 minutes or for the rest of the day. It's amazing the clarity that a little distance can bring. I wasn't expecting Flux Fumes to be so intense. In fact, I hadn't really considered it at first. If you've ever noticed that lingering smell after soldering, that's the flux, and it isn't great to breathe in regularly. When I first started, I was working in a space with low ceilings and virtually no ventilation, which wasn't ideal. So I got a small fume trap, and it made a noticeable difference for me. These days, I use an air purifier system with carbon filters, partly because I also have a laser engraver in the same space, and partly because I have asthma and allergies, so clean air is a higher priority for me. There are a lot of ventilation and filtering options out there, depending on your space, your health needs, and your budget. I'm not a health or safety expert, so I always recommend doing your own research or checking with a professional if you're not sure what's best for your setup. I'll include some links below to the systems that I've used and found helpful in case you'd like to check them out. Thankfully, I've always had a dedicated room for my art, so I've never had to worry about contaminating shared areas in the house. But glass is a messy hobby. We're dealing with lead, flux, chemicals, traditional glass painting dust, and of course, glass bits everywhere. I'm constantly sweeping floors and counters, wiping down surfaces after soldering, and vacuuming my kilns with a HEPA filter vacuum. I wash my hands a lot, especially after handling solder or chemicals. I use Clean All Heavy Metals hand and body soap to wash up with. One of the best studio upgrades I ever made was picking up a butler's broom. You know, the standing broom and dustpan with a long handle. I originally got it because I get dizzy bending down too much, but honestly, it's the cat's meow for sweeping up glass bits without constantly having to bend down. Cleaning up is just part of the deal. But once you get in the habit, it just becomes second nature. But it's more maintenance than people expect when they're first starting out. And it will keep you safer in the long run. Before you ever start stained glass, you don't realize just how many steps are involved. And once you do, you might be asking yourself, why is this taking so long? The truth is, it's supposed to. Every single part of the process is its own skill, and nothing builds on each other the way that you would expect. It's not like learning to do a Sudoku puzzle where the same logic carries through the whole puzzle. It's more like learning to do 4 different sports. Cutting glass? That's like learning to ride a bike for the first time. Grinding and fitting the pieces? Now you're learning to ice skate. Foiling? That's tennis. Completely different coordination, muscle memory, and feel. Soldering? Welcome to football. Whole new game. No step leads naturally into the next, so yes, it's going to take a while, and that's okay. I think a lot of beginners get discouraged, not because they're doing poorly, but because no one told them how much there was to learn. The pace feels slow because you're learning at every single turn. But if you allow yourself to enjoy the process and stop worrying about finishing fast and start focusing on building your skills, you'll be amazed at what you can do, and you'll gain confidence, and eventually the speed will come too. When I was a kid, I spent hours with Lego and puzzles. I liked putting things together and building things. It was always so satisfying. And stained glass is just like that, only with the added thrill of breaking glass and playing with molten metal. It's tactile and creative, and it's just a little bit more exhilarating. Even though it has given me some moments of frustration, it has been a huge source of joy, an enormous source of growth, and it has been a place of peace in my life during some very, very hard times. What about you? What brought you to stained glass? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you're new and feeling overwhelmed, I've got beginner-friendly courses and workshops. Just check the links below. And if you want more tips like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. I've got new videos every other week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. One thing I've learned is to slow down, breathe, and not rush decisions, especially if I'm If you're new and feeling overwhelmed, what are you doing with your eyes?